Hello and welcome to Questions of Life. I'm Cath, I'm here with Donald.
Hello.
We're live in the church and tonight we are talking about resilience, how we can grow in it. I just wanted to bring you an update. Last week we talked about anger and we had a few little emails in, particularly about my driving. I confessed, if you didn't watch the last one, that I'm a little bit of an angry driver. Beep the horn a lot. I just wanted you to know, driving here tonight, I didn't use the horn once. I didn't tail anybody. I was in my best behaviour. Now, I can't tell you what I did for the rest of the week, but tonight I felt a sense of, achievement. I flashed and let people out. I was on a roll. So do not come near me this evening as I drive home, because probably that's all going to go down the pan.
In
now,
the spirit of confession, we lost 2 games in a row and I didn't take it very well by Saturday night, having spent 10 quid to watch it on the iPhone. Yeah. Let's move on.
It's a learning experience for us, isn't it? Yeah, and when you support football teams like we do, you need resilience. Donald, we're getting towards the middle of December, which I find quite difficult to believe, because in some ways this year has been a really difficult year for so many people, and yet it seems to have gone so quickly that we are practically at Christmas. And there's been so much that has gone on this year that I think it's taken its toll on many people. I think people are beginning to feel a little bit fatigued, whether that's mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. It's partly because I think for some people their jobs have been quite manic and quite stressful. Some people have had to work extra hours with extra pressure. I think for some people the pressure's come because maybe they've lost their job, or they've been on furlough, financial difficulties. Maybe there's been illness and bereavement, having the whole family at home for long periods of time and homeschooling and stuff. That's a joy, but also I suspect quite a pressure at times. And then there's the whole, I don't know what's going to happen. I know at Christmas that I've got 5 days to see 3 bubbles, but apart from that, I can't go and see people. I can't do this. There's just so many questions, so many things that have gone on. And so as we've gone through this year, I think many people are fatigued. How would you say you're doing? The very first Questions of Life, I asked you a question. I said, Donald, how are you coping with the start of the pandemic? How are you coping as we get towards the end of the year?
I don't often think about how I'm feeling, which may be a good or a bad thing. I think I am physically tired. I think that I am probably in a slightly better place than when we first did Questions of Life, where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety around whether we were going to be and making the right choices as a church. And I feel in a better place there. I feel we've done well. We've survived. We're here. Yeah. So in that sense, I think lockdown has probably been okay for me. It's been physically very exhausting, but as I've got a handle on it, it's been better. I think I have more anxiety when I think about undoing lockdown.
Okay.
And that causes me more concern as to how we evolve back into life and how we ensure that when we get back into life, we take into that the good things from this experience, and we don't just revert to how we did everything before. So how do we manage the transition where we're half and half and we've got a bit more relaxed, but we're not fully back to normal, and then when we get back to what's normal, how do we make sure that normal is learning from and building on this experience, both as individuals in terms of how we use our time, what's priority, how we value other people, but also as a church, how do we build on what we've actually found to be really successful during lockdown, and how do we... So all of that causes me anxiety because it's unknown and uncertain.
It's interesting that you say all of that, because when we look at resilience, and we are going to look at that this evening, there's a sense that, okay, we're coming towards the end of this really difficult year. For some people, they're holding out for Christmas, get to see loads of loved ones. For others, Christmas is going to be really, really difficult. And then we've got to pick ourselves up again in the new year. And then we don't know what the year's going to look like. So as you say, transitioning from the vaccine through to some kind of normality is going to require resilience and effort and take something out of us again. So this whole topic, I think, is pertinent, not just for now, but to have in our minds for going forward into whatever that is. Who knows? And that's quite scary, thinking about the unknown, but we're going to need resilience. So my first question for you, other than how are you feeling, which you answered well, that was good. I'm glad you're in touch with your feelings. That's fab.
Loosely.
No, you're good. It's great. Just define for us what you think resilience is.
I think it probably means slightly different things to different people. I guess for me, it is the ability to keep going.
Yeah.
It's the ability to put one foot in front of another, and we'll come back to this, through choice, not to give up. So it's around, to me, the area of perseverance. It's the ability to experience obstacles, to experience difficulty, to experience setbacks, to experience failure, to experience problems, and for them not to derail us completely, that we are unable to function or continue in life. So again, you've got to define what you mean by living and what life is. But I think resilience is that ability just to keep going, not to be victorious and happy, but to stay with it. And from a Christian point of view, for me, resilience is saying, whatever the world throws at me, whatever the evil one throws at me, whatever life throws at me, I will continue to follow God. I will continue to seek his purpose for my life. I will continue to seek to know him and walk with him through the day. I will continue to be thankful, and I will not curse him. I will not turn away from him. I will not give up being a Christian. And I guess that for me is the bottom line. For me, resilience is both the practical for everyday people. For me as a Christian, it's that whatever happens at the end of the day, still find me following Jesus. I may be angry with him, and I may be hurting, and I may be fearful, and I may be questioning, but I'm still aiming to be a disciple.
Which is great. But I think resilience is often countercultural to what's going on in our society at the moment. We live in a very disposable society. If you don't like the person you're with, well, let's go out and find somebody else. Not just in relationships, but it seems to be in so many different areas of society that it's very, very transient, very, very temporary. And we don't often see a lot of resilience. We don't often see this in action. I suppose one of my questions is, do you think some people are more resilient than others? So we do live in this society where it's easier to give up. Is that just because of temperament and nature and just who they are? Or are there more people that are more resilient and those that aren't so resilient?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of big factors. I think one is our experience and our upbringing, and I think there are two elements to that.
Yeah.
So I think that if we have had a childhood where mummy did everything for us, where we always got what we wanted, where there was all the love in the world, but absolutely slightly overprotected.
Yep.
And we never really experienced disappointment, or we never really experienced not getting our own way. We had everything we ever wanted. I think that's a disadvantage in life, and I think that can sometimes make it harder for us as adults to accept that not everything goes our way. Now that is get-overable. So I don't think we just say, well, I'm ruined because my parents ruined me. I think, but it just makes it slightly harder because we're not used to failing an exam, not getting the toy that we always wanted. We're not used to something going wrong in life. I think I may have quoted this before, but I love the quote of a lady called Ruth Graham, who was the wife of famous Christian leader Billy Graham, and she talks about how when she looks back on her life, she's an elderly woman now, she may have died by now, she looks back on her life and she says that all the things that she's most proud of in her children were the things she prayed wouldn't happen. In other words, that the things that she tried to stop happening to her children had made them the characters and the resilient people that they are. And there's something about that if everything is easy for us, that can make us less resilient. So that's one aspect from our childhood. The second can almost the opposite, is that if our childhood is filled with people who always gave up, who whenever it got difficult just didn't stick at it, then that becomes a role model. That's what we that we expect and what we see from others. So if all we've ever learned is if it's difficult, don't do it, then I think that also is harder for us as adults to be resilient. As I think about this in my own life, and I think I would probably be characterised as fairly resilient. My mum and dad were incredibly resilient. That's my childhood, that they just stuck at things. I remember having to do things because Dad would say, I said I was going to do it, and I'm going to do it.
Gosh.
And that was his mentality, that if he said he was going to do something, he was going to do it. So I had that role model, so I think that does help me. So those two things are overcomable, but we have to recognise them, and we have to say, actually, I need to learn a different pattern of living to the one that I had as a child, because either I was spoilt or I was exposed to people who just gave up all the time. That said, I think there's a second big area, and I do think that in the same, as in physically, we all have different pain thresholds. That some of us can stub our toe and feel fine, and others will run around the room crying for weeks. And we've all got different thresholds for physical pain. I suspect that's slightly true for difficulty.
Yep.
And that through no fault of our own, just the way we're wired, just the way we're created, we may have different levels of what we can cope with. I was watching a documentary, film, not a documentary, one of those dramas of real events, which was about the cabinet during the Falklands War and inside Number 10 and how the different people, it was all drama, but, and I thought I couldn't have coped with that pressure of having to make decisions about sending men to their death. I've got a level of what I can cope with, and it's not the same as the Prime Minister. I think of that today, I would not be able to make the decisions that the Prime Minister's got to make right now, rightly or wrongly. They're very, very difficult. So, but I am able to carry more pain, perhaps, than others. And I think that whilst, instead of beating ourselves up that we're on different scales, I think partly it's saying, well, with a low threshold for pain tends to come a high sense of compassion and empathy. Whereas with a high threshold for pressure and difficulty, we may be less empathetic. So we can see the good. And when we feel I'm not very good at dealing with pressure, we might say, yes, but I am good at caring for people. So you balance the two.
Yeah.
That said, I think we should always seek to be more resilient than we were last month. And I think we can always improve, but we're not all going to be prime ministers or major generals or leaders of huge organisations.
I'm relieved at that.
Yes.
Talking about the Prime Minister, he's been under the cosh for so long. You just think, where's his resilience coming from? All that he's been through. As you were speaking, I was thinking of Strictly Come Dancing. I know it's one of your favourite programmes that you watch every week, Donald.
You've
never watched it. But you have like a celebrity and they have a dance partner, as you know the premise.
I'm aware of the concept.
You are. When you get a sports person as the celebrity, it's really interesting to see that they've been on, particularly rugby players, they've been on a journey where they've been corrected. You've had to improve, you've had to be resilient, somebody's told you're not good enough, you're not being picked. And rather than giving up and having a strop, you see, right, okay, yep, that's fine, you tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it. And it stands out as a very different mentality from everyone else. So when they're getting critiqued by the judges, they'll be like, okay, that's really helpful, thank you, I'm going to go away and work on that. Whereas everybody else is just crying because, I thought I was brilliant and you've told me I'm rubbish. And it kind of paints out what you're talking about. And I always think, I want to be like the sports person. I want to be able to take whatever comes my way and think, okay, what do I need to do? And I love the idea of, can I be more resilient this week than I was last week? I think that's great. But I think it's good for us to have in mind that we do have these different thresholds, because there's no point berating somebody else if we think, well, you should be able to cope with that. I've done that. And you see that a lot, don't you? Well, what's wrong with them? They must be so weak. Why can't they cope with that? And you just think, here, by the grace of God, go I. If I can, fantastic. But what can I do to support, to encourage, and to stand alongside? And it's not a competition. So we're not all aiming for the same bar, are we? We're saying, okay, this is my life. This is the life that God has created for me. I want to walk that faithfully, keeping my eyes fixed upon him and not giving up on him, and just slowly, maybe very slowly some days, trying to put one foot in front of the other. So let's talk about then this whole idea of resilience. How can we grow in our resilience? How can we be more resilient this week than we were last week? You've got a number of areas that you think, actually, if we begin to think about and put these into action collectively, that they can help us. Where do you want to start with these? I've got a list here.
I guess I would start with choices, and with what are you aiming for, what are you going for, and a lot of this would be just my own personal experience, which may be completely wrong, but this is how I see things. I've always found it helpful to be focused on some principles that I've chosen. And the first and most important principle is I've chosen to follow Jesus. We sing a song, No Turning Back. And I love that. I have decided to follow Jesus, no turning back. I was baptized. I made a promise in the water of baptism that I would follow Jesus.
Can I ask you just a question about that? Has there ever been a moment in your life where you've just thought, this is too hard, I'm going to jack it in? Or have you always thought, I'm running with this, but I'm fed up with you and this is difficult?
I think in the early weeks, months, maybe first year or two of being a Christian, you waver, am I a Christian? So in my story of becoming a Christian, which I think we talked about before, there was a sort of 2-year pregnancy. Now, in that 2-year, from the moment I first decided to follow Jesus at the age of 13 to the moment where I realized that I did want to follow Jesus, I gave up every week. Every week I gave up. And what was different about the end, and I got baptized shortly after that when I was 16, was that I made a decision. And part of it was that I recognized that Satan, the evil one, wanted me to give up. And I was determined when I got baptized, I am going to do this. And that links in, I guess, to the second value and choice, which is for me, is if you say you're going to do something, you do it. And that has driven me to absurd lengths at times. But I don't want to let people down, and I do not want to let God down. So for me, since I was 16, I've been really frustrated. I felt a complete failure. I felt I wanted to give up on ministry, absolutely. But I don't think I've ever, because at the bottom line is I made a choice that wasn't about feeling. I've made a decision. I'm going to follow Jesus. And it's the same for me as the promises one makes in a marriage. You make a decision. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm committed to Jesus. I guess I must sound really hard.
No, I just think
that's what to me, the worst thing is to go back on what I said. And I've chosen to do that.